Hi, I'm Brenda. If this is your first time here, welcome. I share real stories sent to me by brave women who've lived through betrayal, heartbreak, and dark secrets. And trust me, this one cuts deeper than most. So hit subscribe, leave and tell me in the comments if you've ever had your trust shattered from inside your own family. The letter came from a woman named Denise. She's 49, a nurse, divorced twice. But it was her second marriage that almost destroyed her. It's hard to say this out loud, Denise wrote, but the woman who broke my marriage was my daughter. At first, I thought maybe she meant metaphorically. Maybe the stress of raising kids affected the relationship. But no, she meant literally. Her daughter seduced her husband, who was also her stepfather and eventually replaced Denise in every possible way. I never thought my daughter would be the reason I lost everything, Denise said. And for a long time, I blamed myself. Until I stopped crying and started planning. Because what came next wasn't just heartbreak. It was revenge. Denise met Mark when she was 35. He was a contractor, handsome, practical, and soft-spoken. After a toxic first marriage, Mark made her feel seen. She had 2 kids from the first marriage, and though they weren't close to their birth father, Mark stepped up. Her daughter, Leah, was 16 when Mark entered their lives. At first, Denise thought the bond between them was sweet. Mark helped Leah with school projects, took her to driver's ed, and always asked about her day. He's being a good stepdad, she thought, but there were signs. Leah would laugh a little too loud at his jokes. Her touches lingered. She started dressing up around the house, makeup, short shorts, perfume. Denise chalked it up to teenage rebellion. She just wants attention, she told herself. Then came the night everything shifted. Denise had to work a double shift at the hospital. She came home late, exhausted, and found Leah and Mark asleep on the living room couch, too close. His arm around her waist. Leah wearing one of his t-shirts. Denise didn't say anything that night. She stood there in the dark, staring at them. Her heart didn't know whether to break or panic. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe she was being paranoid. But deep down, she already knew. She tiptoed to her bedroom, lay on her back, and stared at the ceiling until morning. When she asked Mark about it later, he shrugged. "We were watching a movie," he said. Leah fell asleep, and I didn't want to wake her. His tone was casual. Leah acted like nothing happened. She hugged Denise in the kitchen, asked about her night at work, and complained about math homework. But there was a smugness under her smile. Denise could feel it. Something unspoken, something dangerous. From that night on, the air in the house changed. Leah became more territorial. She'd sit next to Mark at dinner, finish his sentences, giggle at nothing. Mark, meanwhile, became distant. He stopped kissing Denise on the forehead like he used to. One morning, Denise walked into the bathroom and found Leah's lipstick smudged on Mark's towel. Her own towel was dry, untouched. She stood there, frozen, as the pieces started falling into place. "No," she whispered. "This can't be happening." She started checking Leah's phone when she left it unattended. Most messages were deleted. But one day, Denise found a photo of Leah in front of the mirror in Mark's shirt. The caption read, "Your shirt smells like you." "I miss it already." Denise couldn't breathe. Her knees gave out, and she collapsed onto the bed, clutching the phone. The betrayal wasn't just from a man, it was from her own blood, her daughter, the little girl she raised, protected, and gave everything to. Still, she said nothing. Not yet. Instead, Denise played the same game they were playing, pretending. She smiled at dinner, packed lunches, kissed Mark goodbye. But inside, something was growing. Not sadness. Not fear. Something colder. Denise began collecting proof, not just for herself, but because she knew no one would believe her otherwise. Mark was charming. Leah was manipulative. Together, they could rewrite any truth into a lie and smile through the scandal. She started recording audio from the living room at night using an old phone hidden behind the couch. Some nights there was just silence, other nights soft whispers. Once she heard Leah say, "She doesn't even know how lucky she is." One afternoon, Denise came home early. She walked in and heard water running upstairs. She followed the noise and saw Mark stepping out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, Leah's laughter trailing from her bedroom down the hall. That was the day Denise stopped pretending to be blind. "I'm going out," she said, grabbing her purse with a calmness she didn't recognize in herself. She didn't go far, just parked around the block and waited, phone recording in her lap. An hour later, she returned. The house was quiet. Mark was shirtless, sweaty, and Leah had changed clothes. "You guys didn't hear me come in?" she asked. They looked startled. Mark mumbled something about fixing the washing machine. Denise smiled. "Great, thanks." But inside, her rage turned to clarity. They were bold, arrogant. They thought she would never confront them, never leave, never expose them. And maybe she wouldn't. Not yet. But she would make them regret it because Denise didn't want just an ending. She wanted devastation. She wanted them to look at each other one day and realize they'd built their relationship on the ashes of someone who had once loved them both unconditionally. She didn't need a knife or fire. She had time. She had patience. And most of all, she had the one thing they never saw coming: her silence. Because the loudest revenge is the one that doesn't make a sound until it's too late to escape. Denise began crafting a new version of herself. Not the broken wife, not the betrayed mother, but the woman who watched from the shadows, calculating, memorizing every step they took, every glance they exchanged, every secret they shared. Started journaling everything: times, conversations, patterns. Mark would take Leah out to pick up dinner and come back without food. Leah started staying home from school more often. And still, they acted like Denise didn't know. One evening, Mark brought home takeout. He handed it to Denise with a kiss on the cheek, his lips cold, disconnected. "For my girls," he said. Leah giggled in the background. Denise smiled, nodded, and mentally noted the moment. At work, Denise started asking legal questions. Not directly, but subtly, about custody, property division, betrayal within marriages. Her coworker, a divorcee, gave her a contact. "If you're even thinking about it," she said, "talk to her first." Denise did, quietly. She met the lawyer. During lunch breaks, explaining the situation carefully, removing emotion from her voice. "They're not just having an affair," she said. "They're building a life on top of mine, and I want to pull the rug out." The lawyer was stunned. "Your daughter?" Denise nodded. "I know how this sounds. I wouldn't believe it either, but I have proof." And she slid the phone across the table: texts, recordings, photos. Enough to crack the surface of any courtroom. By the time Denise walked out of that office, she wasn't a victim anymore. She had a plan, a timeline, and a paper trail. But she still didn't confront them. Not yet, because the longer she waited, the deeper they sank into their fantasy, and that fantasy would soon become their downfall. Denise wasn't just walking away. She was going to take her life back piece by piece, and they would never see it coming until the very end. Denise started planting seeds, small, calculated moves that seemed innocent but carried weight. She suggested a family trip. "Just the three of us," she said, "like old times." Mark agreed too quickly. Leah smiled like she'd already. One day they went to a cabin upstate for a weekend. Denise booked it, packed the car, played the role of doting wife and mother. But hidden in her bag was a small USB voice recorder and a journal she'd started calling The Fall. The cabin had no signal, no distractions, just the three of them in close quarters. Denise watched how Leah touched Mark's arm when she thought no one was looking. She counted how many times Mark accidentally brushed Leah's waist. Recorder sat under the coffee table. Denise made sure to leave them alone, taking long walks, claiming headaches, stepping out for firewood. She returned silently each time, collecting footage, sound, expressions they didn't think mattered. That Sunday, she told them she'd forgotten something in town and needed an hour. "Why don't you two start dinner?" she said, keys in hand. Mark offered to drive, but she refused. "You two relax. I'll be quick." They didn't argue. When she returned, she sat in the car outside the cabin for 10 minutes, listening to the audio she'd captured. It was all there: Leah's laughter, Mark's flirtation, whispers of "I wish we didn't have to sneak around." Her stomach churned, but she didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, she smiled. Not out of joy, but clarity. They were careless, and that would be their ruin. She walked back in with groceries, humming softly. They greeted her like nothing happened. "And Denise?" She looked each of them in the eye and said, "I hope this weekend brings us closer." And for once, she wasn't lying. After the trip, Denise made herself more available at home. She cooked Mark's favorite meals. She complimented Leah on her outfits. "You're glowing lately," she said, watching Leah blush. She played her role flawlessly sweet, trusting. Blind. Mark started to relax. He joked more, touched Denise more often in public, as if trying to overcompensate. Leah followed suit, calling her Mom in that overly sweet tone Denise hadn't heard since childhood. It was all an act, and Denise let them perform. At work, Denise began securing her finances. She opened a separate account, transferred small amounts weekly, canceled shared subscriptions, and slowly untangled herself from joint responsibilities. Invisibility is power, she wrote in her journal. She met with her lawyer again and presented the full audio from the cabin. It's enough, the woman said. Emotionally, morally, and legally. If you want to move, now's the time. Denise nodded but waited. Her revenge needed perfect timing. Then she did something unexpected. She invited Leah's biological father, her ex-husband Greg, for dinner. It was Leah's birthday. She deserves both parents at the table, Denise said. Mark hesitated but agreed. Leah beamed. Greg, unaware of the storm, arrived with flowers and a smile. Denise welcomed him warmly. Mark stiffened. Leah looked nervous. Dinner was awkward, but that was the goal. Denise wanted them uncomfortable. She wanted cracks to show. After Greg left, Denise kissed Mark on the cheek and thanked him. You've been so supportive, she whispered. I really appreciate you. Mark softened. Leah avoided eye contact. The trap was tightening, and they didn't even feel the leash. That night, Denise slept better than she had in months. The end was near. But before the explosion, she wanted one more move, one final act to leave a scar so deep neither of them would forget what they'd done. Denise planned a celebration, a second honeymoon for her and Mark. Just a weekend getaway, just the two of them. To reconnect, she said, before life gets too busy again. Mark hesitated at first, but agreed. Leah stayed quiet. She booked a beachfront hotel, prepared matching outfits, and even wrote him a handwritten note. For all the years we've shared, it read, let's make new memories. He packed light, kissed her on the forehead, and promised a fresh start. They left on Friday morning. Leah waved goodbye from the door, barely hiding the smirk on her lips. Denise smiled back, but her eyes stayed cold. She wasn't going to reconnect. She was going to deliver the final act. The hotel suite was beautiful. Denise made sure everything looked like romance candles, champagne, music. She let Mark believe everything was healing, that she still trusted him, that he hadn't already destroyed her from the inside out. They made love that night. Denise let it happen, watching his face closely. She memorized the way he touched her, the lies in his whispers. In the morning, she gave him a small box. Inside it, 2 plane tickets to Hawaii. For you and Leah, she said. Mark froze. His jaw clenched. What is this? Denise smiled. A gift, for the two of you to finally be together. Since you already are. His eyes widened. She stood, dressed, and placed a flash drive on the table. Recordings, texts, pictures, everything. I'm not here to scream, she continued. I'm not here to cry. I just want you to know that I know, and now you'll never forget who handed you both the future you thought you stole. She turned, walked out, and didn't look back. Outside the hotel, Denise exhaled. For the first time in months, the air felt clean. She wasn't broken. She wasn't abandoned. She was the architect of her own closure. And Mark, he was left with the truth gift-wrapped and irreversible. Mark didn't call. He didn't chase her. Instead, he went home to Leah. Denise knew he would. And she knew Leah would read the room, understand the depth of what just happened, and realize that their fantasy had come at a devastating cost. Leah texted her the next day. You didn't have to humiliate us like that. Denise didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. The girl who once called her mommy had become something else, someone she no longer recognized, nor wanted. 2. Within a week, Mark's belongings were gone from the house. Denise changed the locks. She canceled his credit cards and finalized the financial split through her lawyer. Legally, he had no claim to anything. Emotionally, he had even less. Leah moved out 3 weeks later. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't ask for help packing. Denise watched from the window as her daughter drove away with Mark in the passenger seat. She didn't wave. She didn't cry. She simply closed the curtain. People in town whispered. Some were supportive. Others speculated, but Denise didn't defend herself. She didn't owe the world her version of the story. Let them wonder. Let Mark and Leah try to justify their twisted union to the rest of the world. Denise focused on herself. She redecorated the house. She cut her hair. She joined a book club and started taking long walks. Every step she took reminded her of who she used to be before the betrayal. And slowly, that woman came back to life. One night, she received a voicemail from Mark. His voice was slurred. I miss you. Leah's not, she's not you. Denise deleted the message without listening to the end. He had made his choice. And now he could live with it. She didn't need revenge anymore. She had peace. And that was something neither of them could steal because it wasn't built on lies. It was built on survival. Denise didn't rebuild herself out of spite. She did it because she refused to remain in ruins. Her mornings were hers again. Coffee by the window, the sun warming her skin, silence that felt sacred instead of heavy. She joined a fitness class for women over 50. It wasn't about revenge body cliches. It was about movement, breath, presence. The first time she laughed during a workout, she felt something shift inside. A piece of joy that had been buried returned. She saw a therapist. At first, just to process the betrayal. But soon, she found herself exploring years of silence, unmet needs, and the way she'd disappeared in her own marriage. You didn't lose them, the therapist said. You found yourself. Friends came back into her life. Some admitted they'd suspected something about Mark. Others apologized for not speaking up. Denise forgave them all. Bitterness had no room in the space she was reclaiming. Leah texted again, this time a simple, I miss you. Denise stared at the message for a while before deleting it. Love without respect wasn't love, and blood didn't excuse betrayal. Some doors are better left closed, even if they once led to your own child. She began documenting her story, not online, not for revenge, but for herself. Page after page, she wrote the truth in her own words. Not as a victim, but as a woman who had witnessed the worst in people and still chose to heal. Denise wasn't searching for closure anymore. She was already living it. And in that quiet strength, she found something more powerful than any apology. The ability to breathe deeply, sleep soundly, and trust herself again. Months passed, seasons changed. Denise's home felt different now, warmer, quieter, alive. She replaced the bed she once shared with Mark. She repainted the kitchen. She donated everything that held memories soaked in betrayal. She started volunteering at a women's shelter. Once a week, she'd sit with strangers who carried similar scars. She didn't tell them her story, not at first, but they felt it. They recognized the calm that only comes after surviving a storm. One woman hugged her. After a session, you're the first person who made me feel like I'm not crazy. Denise smiled. You're not. You're just finally seeing clearly. And in that moment, she realized her pain had become someone else's lantern. Denise never blocked Leah's number. She just never responded again. Some wounds aren't meant to be reopened. She hoped her daughter would one day see the gravity of her choices, but she also knew that forgiveness didn't require reunion. Mark remarried less. Then a year later, not to Leah, that burned out quickly. Rumors spread about fights, jealousy, cold silences. Denise didn't care. What mattered was that he'd never find peace in the same place he sowed chaos. She sometimes wondered what Leah told people. Maybe she painted Denise as cruel, unyielding. Maybe she lied. It didn't matter. The truth wasn't something Denise needed to prove. It was something she carried like armor, now in her journal. Denise wrote, "They taught me how deep betrayal can cut, but I taught myself how deep I could grow." That was the last page. She closed the book, put it in a drawer, and poured herself a glass of wine, not to toast to revenge, but to resilience. Denise stood in front of her bathroom mirror one evening, towel wrapped around her hair, face freshly cleansed, no makeup hiding the years or the pain. And for the first time in ages, she didn't look for flaws. She looked for proof. Proof that she had endured, that she had been shattered and rebuilt herself without begging anyone to pick up the pieces. What she saw wasn't the same woman who once doubted her worth in the silence of her bedroom. She saw strength in the lines around her eyes, wisdom in the stillness of her expression, grace in the curve of her shoulders. She saw a woman who had been replaced in secret and then chosen herself in full view of the world. She didn't want youth back. She didn't want to erase the years. Every moment had carved her into who she now was. And while betrayal had once defined her story, it no longer defined her identity. There was no room for bitterness in her bathroom. No space for self-pity in her heart. She had cried enough. Now she smiled at her own reflection, not with pride, but with peace. A peace earned, not gifted. She wrote one last message in email. She didn't send it. She didn't even address it. She just needed to write it. I don't hate you. I just no longer carry you with me, and that is freedom. But then she deleted it. Denise turned off the light and walked to bed. Not to escape the past, but to rest in the present. For the first time in years, she didn't fear what tomorrow might bring. She trusted herself to handle whatever came next with dignity. Stories like Denise's are never easy to tell, but they need to be heard. Not for the drama, not for the scandal, but because somewhere out there, another woman is staring at her ceiling at 3 a.m., wondering if she's crazy or if betrayal just changed her. Denise didn't get justice in a courtroom. She got it in silence and strategy, in walking away with her head held high. She didn't burn bridges. She let them collapse under the weight of their own lies. And Leah, well, I won't pretend to know how she sleeps at night, but I do know this: when you betray the person who raised you, you don't just lose their trust, you lose your anchor to truth, to loyalty, to home. As for Mark, he became just another man who mistook quiet for weakness. But Denise showed him, like so many women do, that silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's the sound of a woman loading her final bullet. If you've ever been through something like this, or if you've ever had to rebuild after someone ripped your foundation out from under you, I want you to know you're not alone. You're not broken. You're just beginning again. This story came to me through one of the many letters I receive, and every time I read one like this, I'm reminded why I started this channel in the first place. To give voice to the pain and the power hidden behind closed doors. If this story moved you, I ask you to subscribe, leave a like, and comment below. What kind of stories do you want to hear next? Stories of betrayal, of revenge, of resilience. I read every message, and your words help guide the next tale I bring to life. I'm Brenda, and here every broken heart has its moment to speak.